unaware she inherited a secret $10 billion trust. Husband and his family mocked his sick wife in front of their adopted daughter. Until a visit from the trust officer months later changed everything. He didn't just mock her. He did it while she was hooked to hospital monitors, pale and weak, with their 6-year-old adopted daughter standing at the foot of the bed clutching her favorite stuffed toy. Calder Holt stood over his sick wife, voice raised so the whole room could hear, and said, "You're a poor burden, nothing but dead weight. You curse everything you touch." His mother, Dorcella, didn't stop him. She joined in. "She doesn't belong in this family," Dorcella said coldly. "No class, no ambition, and embarrassment." A couple of relatives snickered. One cousin muttered, "He saved her from the gutter and she still drags him down." No one defended her. Not one person told him to stop. On the bed, Serafina Vale tried to steady her breathing. The dirty water he had thrown on her gown was still drying on her skin. She could feel every pair of eyes judging her, as if being sick made her less human. At the doorway, another woman, Nix Arden, leaned against the frame, watching with a small, satisfied smirk. Near the side of the bed, their little girl, Luma, cried out, "She's not a burden. She's my mama." But the Holt family acted like her voice didn't matter either. What none of them knew, not Calder, not Dorcella, not the relatives laughing at her, was that Serafina wasn't just the poor sick wife they liked to insult. For years, her name had been written in a private $10 billion trust. A trust officer had already been trying to reach her. One notice had gone missing from her mailbox. Another, sealed and marked urgent, had been intercepted at the hospital right in front of her, then burned. Months later, when a man in a dark suit would walk into the Holt estate, open a folder, and say the words Serafina Vale, sole heir, every cruel sentence they spoke in that hospital room would come back to choke them. This isn't just a story about a family mocking a sick wife. It's about what happens when you laugh at the woman you think is powerless, while standing on a fortune that secretly belongs to her. Dear viewers, thank you for being here. If you watch without subscribing, it's almost like standing silent in that hospital room while they mock Serafina. When you click that button, you stand with every person who has been called burden, dead weight, or embarrassment and still chose to rise. Please subscribe now and tell me in the comments where you're watching from. The sound of a slammed door shattered the morning calm. Serafina Vale, 32, soft-spoken, gentle-eyed, flinched before she even turned her head. Calder Holt, her 35-year-old husband, stormed into the foyer with the same sharpness he used whenever he felt inconvenienced. His suit was perfect, his hair was perfect, and his expression was colder than both. "Why is this place always a mess?" he snapped, even though the marble floor shone and every cushion was straight. You'd think someone who grew up poor would at least know how to take care of something. The insult landed like a slap, but Serafina did not react. She never gave him the satisfaction. Instead, she quietly adjusted the backpack of their 6-year-old adopted daughter, Luma, who stood between them with wide, alert eyes. Luma watched everything now. She had learned too early that moods change faster than weather in this house. This was their life. Calder demanding, Calder insulting, Calder irritated with her very existence. But this wasn't where the story began. To understand Serafina's silence, her patience, you had to understand the world she came from before Calder tried to erase her. Serafina Vale was raised far from luxury. Her guardian, an elderly woman named Maeve, had taken her in at age 8 after a family accident Serafina barely remembered. Maeve was not wealthy, but she was educated, meticulous, and strangely connected to people Serafina never met. Letters arrived sometimes in thick envelopes with foreign stamps. Maeve always read them in private. She gave no explanations, only lessons. How to read a contract word by word, how to recognize hidden clauses, how to stay quiet until the right moment. "Quiet is power," Maeve would say, tapping the edge of a thick binder. People underestimate silence. At 12, Serafina experienced her first real mystery. Maeve sat her at a long wooden table, lit by a single lamp. A document lay in front of the girl, heavy paper, strange seal, a name she didn't know. Vale, Trust Division Private Holdings. Maeve let her see the heading, then slid it away before Serafina could read more. "Some inherit money," Maeve said softly. "You inherit responsibility." Serafina frowned. "What responsibility?" Maeve gave her the smallest smile. "When the time comes, they will come to you. Until then, you learn. And you do not sign anything carelessly, ever. No explanation, no numbers, no list of assets. Just a locked metal case Maeve hid in the attic and a rule that never changed. Wait, watch, read everything. Those early teachings shaped her. Even after Maeve passed when Serafina was 19, she continued signing every form with slow, careful eyes. It was a habit Calder mocked whenever he could. Back in the bright Holt foyer, Calder rolled his eyes while she checked Luma's zipper again. "You waste time on pointless details," he muttered. "Always thinking, always reading, never actually useful." Serafina remained calm. She had learned long ago that people like Calder mistook softness for weakness. Luma tugged Serafina's sleeve. "Mama, can you walk me today?" Before Serafina could answer, Calder cut in. "No, she's slow. I'll take you. I don't have all day to wait for her." He turned to Serafina with a smirk. "Skip the bread tonight. You're already looking heavier." Luma frowned. "Dad." Calder ignored her. He always ignored her when he was insulting Serafina. Yet Serafina still held her peace, because while Calder believed she had nothing, no power, no wealth, no defense, he was wrong. Deeply wrong. The seeds of that truth lived quietly inside her past. After Calder left with Luma, Serafina walked to her small desk in the corner of the sitting room. Documents waited there, school forms, insurance letters, boring mail. Calder never handled himself. A few weeks earlier, one envelope had stood out from the rest thick cream paper, no company logo, her name written in precise black ink. She'd left it on the corner of the desk while she finished Luma's school forms. By evening it was gone. Calder said he hadn't seen it. She told herself she must have misplaced it and tried not to think about it. She sat now and began reading one of the ordinary letters with the same careful attention Maeve had drilled into her. As her eyes traced the lines, memories flickered. The long wooden table. Maeve's steady voice. "Do not fear what people think of you," Maeve had said. "One day they will change how they speak when they learn who you really are." "Who am I?" young Serafina whispered. Maeve touched her cheek. "Someone whose worth is already written. Hidden, but written." The flash faded. Present-day Serafina touched the edge of the document thoughtfully. Calder's comments didn't break her. She had survived harsher teachers than him. A photograph on her desk caught her eye. Maeve, standing beside a tall man in a dark suit. His face was half-shadowed, but the bold print on the document beneath the photo stood out clearly. Vale Trust Division Private Holdings. Serafina traced the old seal with her fingertip, the same symbol she had seen on Maeve's hidden papers. She never spoke of the trust, didn't understand its size, didn't know the rules. Maeve had said it wasn't time, and Serafina had obeyed. She placed the photo back and tucked a slim, sealed folder deeper into the drawer. It wasn't cowardice, just discipline. Wait. Watch. Do not reveal what is not necessary. Footsteps approached small, quick. Luma burst back in, cheeks flushed, breath short. "Dad left his phone," she said. "He told me to bring it." "But, Mama?" Serafina knelt. "What is it, sweetheart?" Luma looked at her with a strange, searching sadness. "Mama, why do you flinch when people talk about money?" Serafina froze. She opened her mouth to answer, but a vibration came from Calder's forgotten phone. The screen lit up on the console table. Message from Nix Arden. "Did you tell her yet?" Serafina's breath caught. The name meant nothing to her yet. The question did. "Tell her what?" Her eyes moved from the phone to the drawer with Maeve's seal, and back again. A dull ache started under her ribs. She thought it was stress. It was the first quiet warning from the illness that would soon send her to the hospital. Some truths don't stay hidden forever, and some betrayals begin long before anyone names them. The pain hit her like a sudden knife under the ribs, sharp, fast, stealing her breath before she could steady herself. Serafina gripped the edge of the hospital bed as another wave of dizziness moved through her. Monitors beeped softly, not yet alarming, but her body felt loud inside her skin. Her vision blurred, then cleared. The nurse at her side spoke gently. "Deep breaths, Mrs. Holt. In through your nose, out through your mouth," Serafina tried. She had lived with these episodes for years, chronic fatigue, sudden dizzy spells, a heart that sometimes raced without reason. Calder called it drama. Doctors called it an irregular rhythm and stress. Now the episodes were closer together. This time, the family doctor insisted on hospital tests. Calder Holt burst into the room with his usual force, pushing the door wider than necessary. His expression held irritation instead of concern. "What now?" he barked. "The nurse texted that you felt faint again. You always overreact." His dismissal cut through her more than the pain did. Luma, who had been coloring in a tiny notebook by the window, rushed to Serafina's side and climbed onto the chair, grabbing her mother's hand. "Mama, breathe slow," she said. "Like you taught me," Calder scoffed. "She teaches you to panic. She's always been dramatic." Before Serafina could respond, another figure stepped in. Dorcella Holt. Calder's mother moved like she owned the hospital. She removed her sunglasses as if the fluorescent lights offended her. "She looks heavier," Dorcella said loudly, examining Serafina like a broken item on a shelf. "Is that from lying around all day?" Serafina's cheeks warmed. She never liked attention. Humiliation felt worse in public. The nurse, standing by the monitor, stilled at the insult. Her eyes softened with sympathy, but she said nothing. She knew the Holt name. She also knew how quickly complaints from them could cost someone a job. Calder checked his watch, an expensive piece he'd bought shortly after he started taking late business meetings, with a consultant named Nick Sarden. Serafina knew the name now. She had quietly searched Calder's phone bill one night. "Nick's called often." "I don't have time for this," Calder muttered. "Doctors love drama." "Just handle it," Serafina swallowed. "Mama's not dramatic," Luma said suddenly, chin raised. Her small voice trembled, but her eyes were fierce. "She's hurting." Dorcella gave the child a thin, mocking smile. Children should stay out of adult matters. Serafina squeezed Luma's hand before the girl could reply. She didn't want Luma punished for defending her. The nurse stepped forward. "Mrs. Holt, your last EKG showed some irregular rhythm. We need to monitor you a bit longer. Any shortness of breath? Chest tightness?" Serafina opened her mouth to answer, but Calder spoke first. "She's always feeling something. She reads too much into every small ache." The nurse hesitated. Serafina lifted her hand slightly, signaling she would speak for herself. "I just need a moment," she whispered. "It comes and goes." The nurse nodded, adjusted a setting, and then a soft notification beep sounded from the station outside. She stepped into the hallway, then returned with a small stack of items, labs to sign, a plastic cup for urine tests, and one cream-colored envelope. "This came earlier this morning," the nurse said. "Registered mail, hand-delivered by a courier. It's marked urgent, addressed to Serafina Vale Holt." Serafina's chest tightened. The envelope carried a seal raised, formal, identical to the one she had seen in Maeve's old papers. Before Serafina could reach for it, Dorcella stepped forward, faster than anyone expected, and took the envelope out of the nurse's hand. "She doesn't need paperwork right now," Dorcella said coolly. "She can barely focus as it is." Calder gave a short laugh. "Exactly. Don't hand her anything important. She'll just make a mess of it." The nurse blinked, surprised. "Ma'am, this was signed for by family," Dorcella cut in. "And I am family." The nurse looked at Serafina. Serafina's lips parted, but years of being dismissed held her back for 1 second too long. Dorcella slid the envelope into her handbag with a smooth, practiced motion. Serafina's pulse quickened. She had seen that seal before. Maeve once told her, "One day something sealed will arrive. Do not be afraid of it. Do not let anyone else speak for you." Now someone else had it. Luma, still holding her hand, leaned closer. "Mama, you look sad." Serafina forced a gentle smile. "I'm okay, little light." She wasn't. The nurse lingered beside the bed, clearly uncomfortable. Her eyes flicked once toward Dorcella's bag, then back to Serafina. I'll note in your chart that urgent mail was delivered," she said quietly. The words were careful, but there was meaning beneath them. A record, a trail. "Let us know if you need anything," she whispered before slipping out. Serafina watched her leave. As the door closed, she caught a glimpse of something on the corner of the envelope inside Dorcella's bag, a faint, unfamiliar symbol printed next to the seal. Not just a trust seal. An activation mark Maeve had once pointed at in a textbook and called the point of no return. For the first time in a long time, Serafina's breath caught not from illness, but from fear. Something important had finally reached her, and someone else had taken it. Some hands take what doesn't belong to them, and some take it for a purpose far darker than silence. By late afternoon, the hospital's family lounge buzzed with low conversation, coffee smells, and the soft drone of a muted TV. Serafina had been wheeled there for a short break from the machines. She insisted on standing now, gripping the back of a chair to prove to Luma she was fine. She wasn't. Her knees trembled. Her pulse fluttered in her throat. But she needed to look steady. Chaos met her the moment she stepped fully inside. Dorcella Holt stood in the center like she owned the room. She was rearranging furniture, giving orders to a young staff member. "Move that chair," Dorcella commanded, pointing to the spot beside Calder. "Calder's guest will sit here." Her tone made it clear this was not a request. Serafina froze mid-step. Calder stood near his mother, arms crossed, leaning back casually as if posing for a camera. His smirk gave Serafina her first warning that something was planned. Then she saw her. Nix Arden, the name from Calder's phone. Now a real person in a real place. Nix stepped forward with effortless grace, tall, elegant, hair styled in soft waves over a designer blouse. She wore a visitor's badge clipped neatly to her lapel, as if she belonged here, as if she had every right to be in the family's private crisis. Her smile was slow, sharp. "Hello, Serafina," Nix said, voice silky. "I'm glad you're, well, standing today. Calder said you've had quite a spell." It sounded polite. It wasn't. Calder's eyes glowed with satisfaction. "Nix came to support the family," he said, as if that made sense. "Don't make it awkward." Serafina's breath tightened. This was their hospital stay, their child's worry, their fight for her health, and he brought his mistress. Dorcella gestured to the chair she had just moved to Calder's side. "Sit here, Nix," she said warmly. "This is Calder's place. Naturally, his guest should be next to him." Nix sat gracefully straight into the chair Serafina usually took when doctors gave updates. Serafina stood frozen in the doorway, one hand on Luma's shoulder. Heat rose up the back of her neck. This wasn't subtle betrayal. This was intentional replacement, performed publicly, designed to crush her. Nix crossed her legs slowly, letting her heel tap the floor. She looked Serafina up and down with a soft, satisfied smile. "For success, darling," Nix murmured, just loud enough. "Something you clearly don't understand." A wave of whispers rippled through the room. Calder's siblings, a couple of cousins, and two family friends watched with tense interest. No one defended Serafina. Silence, here, meant permission. Calder glanced at her, lips lifting in a mocking half-smile. "Don't embarrass me, just stand there, it's better for everyone." The insult sliced through the last pieces of dignity she had left from the morning, replacement humiliation, class shaming, erasure tactics. Every cruelty Maeve once warned her about was unfolding in real time. Serafina tried to inhale slowly, grounding herself like Maeve had taught her. Calm through pain, quiet through cruelty. Her chest ached from the effort. Beside her, Luma looked up with confused eyes. "Mama," she whispered, tugging Serafina's sleeve. "Why is she in your place?" Serafina swallowed hard. How did someone explain adultery and cruelty to a 6-year-old? She couldn't. Not yet. Nix leaned back in the stolen chair, hand resting lightly on Calder's arm. Calder turned toward her, talking softly, laughing in a way Serafina didn't recognize anymore. Serafina reached for another chair to steady herself. Dorcella saw and smirked. "Careful, dear. We wouldn't want you fainting. It's already dramatic enough having you in here." "I'm fine," Serafina said quietly. "Good," Calder replied. "The last thing we need is more drama from you." Luma's small hand slid into hers, gripping tight. "It's okay, little light," Serafina whispered, forcing her voice to stay steady. "Mama's here." Nix tilted her head. "For now," she murmured, eyes glittering. Serafina heard it. Everyone did. A couple of cousins looked away. A hospital security guard standing near the door shifted uncomfortably. He had seen Serafina earlier with Luma and the nurse. His jaw tightened. He said nothing. Calder turned to Nix, ignoring his wife. "You look great today," he said lightly. "I knew that color would suit you." He had never spoken to Serafina like that, not even when they first married. Nix reached forward, a little too bold, and adjusted the edge of Serafina's scarf at her neck. Her fingers brushed Serafina's collarbone, too intimate for a stranger, too cruel for a rival. Her smile sharpened. She leaned closer, breath warm and false against Serafina's ear. "You won't be here much longer," Nix whispered. The words struck like ice. Serafina stiffened. Luma gasped softly. Nix leaned back, expression smooth, as if she hadn't said anything at all. That's when Serafina noticed something else. Dorcella's handbag, resting on the small side table, was unzipped, just enough for a cream-colored corner of paper to show. The urgent envelope, the trust seal, still there for now. Sometimes enemies don't just replace you, they prepare to remove you long before you know it's happening. The shouting started before the consultation room door even shut. Calder Holt stormed inside first, jaw tight, footsteps sharp. Dorcella followed with controlled calm, like a queen entering a throne room. Nix Arden slipped in last, closing the door with a soft click that somehow felt louder than Calder's anger. Inside, Calder's siblings, Ronan and Marin Holt, sat at a rectangular table. They stood when Calder entered, more out of habit than respect. They didn't know the details yet. But they knew the Holt family didn't gather like this for good news. Dorcella placed a large folder on the table and opened it. Inside were photographs printed in glossy color. Serafina walking out of a pharmacy alone. Serafina speaking to a male nurse in a hallway. Serafina sitting in a waiting room, hand pressed to her forehead. All harmless on their own. All cropped, zoomed, and chosen to look suspicious. She's unstable, Dorcella said, tapping a finger on the pictures. Always has been. Look at her eyes. Ronan squinted. She looks tired. Marin nodded slowly. Stressed. Exactly, Dorcella said. Stressed women make dangerous choices. We cannot have someone like that representing our name. Nick stepped closer, her expression smooth. If Dorcella was the architect, Nix was the decorator of this cruelty. I pulled some numbers, Nick said, laying another sheet on the table. Small transfers, little purchases. She keeps misplacing funds. It suggests emotional instability, poor impulse control. The report looked official. It wasn't. Oris would later prove the file was falsified and edited on Nix's personal laptop, but today, in this room, no one checked. Calder didn't ask for proof. He didn't want truth. He wanted permission. I knew she was dead weight, Calder muttered, picking up a photo as if it contained evidence of betrayal. Always dragging us down. Always sick. Always. Slow. Nix's lips curved. Unstable wives can be. Inconvenient during divorce petitions. Judges like clear stories. Dorcella folded her hands, pleased. We need a narrative. She's fragile, depressed, unable to manage finances or a household. That will justify removing her from anything important: money, Luma, decisions. And if she ever gets some kind of inheritance, her eyes glinted, we position ourselves as protectors, for the child, for the estate. There it was, the lie. New but already polished. Serafina isn't dangerous, Marin said softly. She's quiet. Quiet people hide the most, Dorcella replied. You know that. Ronan shifted. We just need to be careful legally, Mother. We can't just throw her out. Dorcella turned to the two Holt private security officers standing near the wall. They had been called in for family safety. Now their real purpose became clear. Prepare incident reports, Dorcella ordered. Anytime she looks confused, write it down. If she stumbles, record it. If she raises her voice, she's unstable. We are building a case. The words hit the room like a cold draft. Calder didn't flinch. Ronan and Marin exchanged uneasy looks but said nothing. Nix leaned on the table, confident. She won't fight, Nix said. She's too busy feigning and clutching her chest, and she has no money for lawyers. Dorcella smirked. And when the time comes, she'll have no one to defend her. Calder cracked his knuckles. Let's finish this. They lowered their voices, speaking about doctors they could suggest, therapists who might agree to write certain phrases, relatives who would gladly repeat the story, everything precise, everything cruel. Serafina had no idea any of this was happening, but someone did. One of the security officers, newer, younger, less hardened, shifted his weight. He had seen Serafina earlier when Luma hugged her. He had also seen Calder laughing with Nix. His stomach twisted, but silence, in this room, was safety. Dorcella closed the folder with a snap. It's settled, she said. We move quickly. I'll have the envelope taken care of tonight. No one needs to know it ever arrived. Nix pulled out her phone. She opened a message thread labeled housekeeper, private. She typed a single word, burn. Below it, she attached a photo of the cream-colored envelope with the trust seal. Her thumb hovered for a heartbeat, then tapped send. A slow smile spread across her face. Some fires destroy evidence, but some leave just enough ash to tell the truth. The next morning, the attack began before Serafina even realized the door had opened. She was back in her hospital room, pale from tests, back propped against pillows. Her hair was loosely braided the way Luma liked. The machines around her beeped in slow, steady rhythms. She had almost convinced herself she could endure a few more days like this. Then Dorcella Holt marched in, carrying a metal cleaning bucket. Behind her came Calder, his stride aggressive, his irritation already simmering. Nix slipped in last. The same designer bag hanging from her shoulder, the one she'd used the night before when she'd watched the housekeeper burn Serafina's envelope and stuffed the half-burned remains inside. She leaned against the wall, watching. Luma had just come back from the nurse's station with a cup of juice. She stopped in the doorway, small fingers tightening around the cup when she saw the bucket. Serafina frowned. "What are you doing with that?" Dorcella lifted the bucket with both hands. "If you're sick," she announced loudly, "then you should be purified." "Mother," Calder said with a twisted smile, "don't spill it on the floor. You know how she hates a mess." Serafina's heart sped up. "Put it down. This is a hospital." But she didn't get another word out. Calder stepped forward in one fast, angry motion. Before she could shield herself, he tilted the bucket and dumped the dirty, cold water over her chest and lap. The shock robbed her breath. The water was icy, seeping instantly through her thin gown, soaking the sheets. The harsh smell filled her nose. Drops splashed onto the floor and onto Luma's shoes. For one long second, the room went silent. Even the machines seemed to fade. Then gasps burst from the doorway. A nurse who had been walking past froze. A junior doctor stopped mid-step. No one expected that. Calder straightened, breathing hard, his expression twisted with disgust. "Poor Burden," he said loudly, making sure the witnesses heard. "You curse everything you touch." Nix pressed her lips together, eyes bright with cruel satisfaction as she watched Serafina tremble. Dorcella nodded like someone judging a performance. "Look at her, so dramatic, so weak. If you ask me, this is exactly why she shouldn't be part of our family anymore." Serafina's teeth chattered. Not from cold, from shock. She didn't scream. She didn't shout. Years of Maeve's training endure, observe, record held her still even as humiliation burned under her skin. Luma let out a sound so sharp it cut through the whole room. "Stop!" she cried, dropping the juice and rushing forward. "Stop! You're hurting her." Calder didn't even look at her. "Stay out of this, Luma. This is adult business." Luma pushed at his leg, tears streaming. "She's my mama. Don't hurt her." Nix's smirk curved deeper. She leaned toward Calder and whispered, just loud enough for Serafina to hear, "She always gets emotional. So messy." Serafina swallowed hard, lifting a shaking hand to brush water from her eyes. She pulled Luma close with her other arm. "It's okay, little light," she whispered. "Mama's here." From the doorway, the nurse finally moved. "Sir, you can't do that," she said, voice firming. "This is a hospital. I'm going to have to report," Calder snapped. "Report what? I was helping." She needed to wake up. She always acts half dead. The nurse looked at the soaked sheets, the shivering patient, the crying child. Her jaw set. "I'm still documenting this," she said, "and I'll be calling the charge nurse." Dorcella clicked her tongue. "Oh, please. We donate enough to this hospital. Don't make a scene over a little water." The nurse didn't back down this time. "Leave," she said. "Now, all of you, unless you're immediate caregivers. I'll get fresh linens." Calder stared at her, then at the security camera in the corner he had forgotten was there. A flash of uncertainty crossed his face. "Fine," he muttered. "We were leaving anyway." Dorcella lifted her bag. Nix pushed off the wall to follow. Nix lingered for one last dig. "You should rest," she said sweetly. "You look exhausted." Serafina said nothing. Nix turned toward the door, and something small fell from her bag as she moved. A tiny, charred fragment of cream-colored paper fluttered to the floor near the bed. Luma saw it first. "Mama," something dropped. When the room finally emptied of Holtz and the nurse stepped out to get dry linens, Serafina forced her aching body forward just enough to see the scrap. Her fingers trembled as she picked it up. Soot stained her skin. A single clear word cut through the burn marks. Trust. The same word on Maeve's documents. The same seal on the stolen envelope. Her breath hitched. This was no accident. Nix had carried burned pieces of her letter. This wasn't just cruelty anymore. It was proof. Some things burn easily, but some secrets survive the fire, waiting for the right person to uncover them. All right, here's the second half. Scene 610 rewritten, all dots connected, and then a breakdown of the logic gaps I fixed for these scenes. 2 days after the humiliation, the hospital discharged Serafina. The cardiologist adjusted her medication, wrote stress-related triggers in her file, and gently suggested counseling. The nurse who had witnessed the dirty water incident walked her to the elevator in silence. "If you feel unsafe at home," the nurse said softly, "there are people you can call. I documented what happened." Serafina nodded once. "Thank you." Calder hadn't come that morning. He'd sent a short text. "Work. We'll talk later." Dorcella didn't come at all. Nix never visited unless Calder was there. Serafina knew what "we'll talk later" meant. He would talk. She would endure. Not this time. She held Luma's hand tightly as they walked out of the hospital. The air felt too bright, too sharp for someone who had been under fluorescent lights and judgmental eyes. Calder had arranged a driver, but when the car pulled up, Serafina didn't give the whole address. She gave a different one. A small, modest building on the quieter side of town. A furnished short-stay apartment Maeve once pointed out years ago and called a safe place if you ever need to breathe. Back then, Serafina didn't understand. Now she did. The driver didn't care. He dropped them off, took his payment from the Holt account, and left. Inside the temporary apartment, the silence was heavy but kind. No Dorcella, no Calder, no Nix. Just a couch, a small table, a narrow kitchen, and space to think. Luma fell asleep on the couch, still clutching her stuffed toy. Her small body curled toward the back cushions, finally relaxed. Serafina watched her for a long time. Then she took off her necklace. The tiny rusted key that had hung around her neck since she was 8 swung from the chain. It had once opened a metal case under Maeve's bed, later under Serafina's. After she married Calder, she moved the case to a safe deposit box so no one in the Holt house could touch it. She had never opened it fully, not until now. She went to the bedroom, closed the door gently, and pulled a slim safe deposit envelope from her bag. She had stopped by the bank on the way from the hospital, hands still shaking, and signed for the box Maeve had left in her name. Now the metal case sat on the bedspread, dull and familiar. Serafina slid the key into the lock. It turned with a soft click. Inside were 3 things: a folded document with Maeve's careful handwriting, a business card with a name and phone number, and a small yellowed instruction card. She picked up the card first. "If they ever strip you of dignity, call." Her throat tightened. They had. In front of nurses, in front of her child. She picked up the business card. Malin Cross, attorney at law, small print at the bottom. Trust and estate protection. Confidential counsel. Serafina's fingers hovered over her phone screen for a heartbeat. Then she dialed. The line rang once, twice. Then a calm female voice answered. "This is Malin Cross." Serafina swallowed. "Malin, my name is Serafina Vale." "Maeve." "Yes," Malin interrupted gently. "I've been expecting your call. Maeve told me you might need help one day." Serafina froze. "She did?" Maeve planned ahead, Malin said. "Where are you? Are you safe?" Serafina glanced toward the living room where Luma slept. "I'm in a temporary apartment, away from my husband, away from his family." "Good," Malin replied. "Text me your address. I'm coming over." "And Serafina?" "Yes?" "Don't apologize for calling. This is exactly why Maeve hired me." Malin Cross arrived within hours. She was in her early 40s, sharp-featured, hair tied back simply, dressed in a dark suit that looked like it had seen more courtrooms than parties. She stepped into the apartment, took everything in with one quick sweep, and sat at the table. "I'm your legal counsel now," she said without small talk. "Nothing you say leaves this room without your permission. Start from the beginning, slowly." So Serafina did. She told her about Calder's constant insults, Dorcella's cruelty, Nix's presence at the hospital, the stolen envelope, the dirty water, the burned fragment with the word trust, Maeve's teachings, the symbol on the seal. She did not cry. She simply told the truth. Malin listened without interrupting, only asking a few precise questions. "When did you first see the sealed envelope? Who else saw it? What did the nurse do?" When Serafina finished, Malin leaned back. They've crossed several lines, she said. Not just moral ones, legal ones. She pulled out her phone and sent a short message. A quiet knock came at the door 40 minutes later. A man in his late 30s walked in square glasses, calm eyes, a worn leather notebook in hand. "This is Oris Pike," Malin said, former compliance auditor. "Now, he helps clients like you when someone has been creative with money and documents." Oris nodded politely. "I work quietly, but thoroughly." He sat, opened his notebook, and clicked his pen. "Did anyone intercept your mail recently?" he asked. Serafina stiffened. "Yes, at the hospital. Dorcella took a cream-colored envelope addressed to me. It had the same seal as Maeve's trust papers." "Describe the seal," Oris said. She did. Every line, every symbol, even the small activation mark in the corner. Oris's expression sharpened. "That's not a random logo. That's a registered trust insignia." "What does that mean?" Serafina asked. "It means," Oris replied slowly, "that someone interrupted an official trust communication. And if they burned it, as you suspect, that's destruction of legal correspondence, especially if the trust is large." "Large?" Serafina repeated. Malin's eyes were steady on her. "Maeve never told you the figures?" "No," Serafina whispered. "She just said I inherited responsibility." Malin opened her own folder and slid a single sheet across the table. "We suspected this might be connected to you for years," she said. "Maeve hired me to monitor the Vale Trust quietly and to act if anyone interfered with you. We sent a formal notice to your home address first. When it never reached you, the trust arranged a registered courier to the hospital." Serafina looked down. "Vale Dynasty Trust. Beneficiary file. Serafina Vale?" Her heart pounded. "She named me?" Serafina asked. "She built the entire structure around you," Malin corrected softly. "And your safety." Oris tapped the table lightly. "If Holtz intercepted that envelope, they didn't just insult you, they interfered with this." He pointed to the trust document. Malin nodded. "Which changes this from private family cruelty to something much larger. Fraud, obstruction," Oris added, "and possibly inheritance interference." Serafina stared at the sheet, at her name printed in bold. Calder had always told her she was nothing. The paper in front of her said otherwise. Oris closed his notebook. "We'll need a copy of that burned fragment. Hospital records, security footage, bank statements, phone logs. We'll move step by step." Malin's voice softened. "You don't have to fight alone anymore, Serafina. Maeve saw what you might face. She put people in place for this exact moment." Serafina exhaled slowly. Her silence wasn't empty anymore. It was loaded. With evidence. With names. With Maeve's plan finally waking up. Some crimes hide in ashes and bank lines, but ashes still carry fingerprints and numbers. Over the next several weeks, the apartment no longer felt like a refuge. It felt like a war room. The dining table was covered in files, printouts, and a small portable forensic lamp Oris had brought. Luma spent most of her time in the bedroom, drawing or watching cartoons with headphones on, checked on every hour by Malin between phone calls. Oris Pike stood over the table now, sleeves rolled up, hands steady. "This," he said, tapping a burned fragment under the lamp, "is where we start." The charred corner of paper glowed faintly under the light. The word trust still cut through the blackened edges. Serafina sat with her hands folded, eyes never leaving the fragment. The investigation did not explode. It advanced like a blade, silent, precise, and meant for cutting lies. A forensic document specialist Oris worked with joined them one afternoon, a quiet man with gloves and a small kit. "The fibers match high-security trust stationery," he said after examining the fragment. "Watermark confirms it belongs to a registered financial entity. This wasn't a personal letter, it was institutional." "And the seal?" Oris asked. "The imprint is partial but distinct. Combined with Miss Vale's description and the trust registry, it's enough to confirm origin." "The Vale Trust Division," Malin said. Serafina inhaled, not in fear this time, but with a sharp recognition. Maeve's warnings, the seal, the activation mark. Oris photographed everything and logged it. "This proves something was burned," he said, "and that it was never junk mail." Next came the numbers. With Malin's legal requests and a quiet nudge from the trust's own legal department, Oris obtained bank records. Not all at once, but piece by piece. He spread them out like a puzzle. These, he said, highlighting a line of transactions on his laptop, are your joint accounts. Serafina leaned closer. Calder had always accused her of spending too much whenever he wanted to shame her. Oris's cursor moved down a column. Except the bigger withdrawals and transfers, he pointed out. They don't go to you, they go here. He opened another file, a personal account in Nick Arden's name. Small transfers at first, a few hundred, then a few thousand. Then, after Serafina's illness worsened, five-figure sums. Calder told everyone he had to cover your medical bills, Malin said. In reality, he was bleeding the account into his mistress's pocket. A slow, cold understanding settled in Serafina's chest. They starved me, she said quietly, then told everyone I was irresponsible. Oris nodded. It's textbook financial abuse, and it gives them a motive to hide any money that might come to you from a trust, for example. Malin placed a printed copy of the audit Nix had presented in the Holt consultation room on the table. We obtained this through discovery, she said. Calder's lawyer thought it helped them. Oris connected his laptop, opened the digital version, and went straight to the metadata. There, he said, tapping the screen. Created on Nix's personal laptop. Not a company server, not a professional email domain. And see these edits? He scrolled through a log of changes. She built it from a template she downloaded somewhere, then altered numbers to make it look like you were draining funds. She even mislabeled one of Calder's transfers to herself as yours. Sloppy. Serafina gave a short, humorless exhale. Almost a laugh. She always said I had no business sense, she murmured. Projection, Malin replied. People like that assume others are as dishonest as they are. Malin's phone buzzed. She answered, listened, then ended the call. That was the hospital's legal department, she said. They've complied with our records request. We have incident notes, nursing statements, and security footage. She opened a folder and slid some pages toward Serafina, several short statements from nurses and a junior doctor. Patient's husband dumped dirty water on her. Mother-in-law belittled patient's condition. Child present and distressed. Attempted to intercept registered mail. Serafina's eyes moved over each line. They saw, she whispered. Yes, Malin said. And now it's not just a memory, it's documented. Oris opened a video file. Grainy footage appeared. A hallway shot of Dorcella taking an envelope from a nurse and placing it in her handbag. He slowed it down, frame by frame. There, he said. Envelope, seal, timestamp. We now know exactly when your trust letter was intercepted. Serafina didn't look away. Not once. When the table was finally covered with proof-burned fragment, financial records, forged audit, statements, video, Oris leaned back. They thought burning one letter would erase its existence, he said. Malin added. In reality, destroying it creates a new problem for them. Intent. Serafina sat quietly for a moment. Then she said, I don't want this hidden. Malin looked up. What do you mean? I don't want this to be just paperwork in a file somewhere, Serafina replied. They humiliated me publicly. They called me weak. I want the truth to be just as visible as their cruelty was. Malin's gaze was steady. If we take this to court, there will be media interest. Calder is known in business circles. Nix has clients. Dorcella runs in certain social groups. They will fight back. Hard. They didn't ask my permission when they used me as a story, Serafina said. So I won't ask theirs to correct it. Oris's lips curved faintly. Respect. Malin nodded once. Then we move. She pulled out a fresh document and placed it gently in front of Serafina. Petition for dissolution of marriage. Serafina Vale Holt versus Calder Holt. This is step 1, Malin said. Divorce, custody petition, financial accounting, protective orders, and formal notice to the trust that their beneficiary is under direct attack. Serafina's hand trembled, but not from fear. From decision. She picked up the pen. Maeve's voice echoed in her memory. Quiet is power. Don't waste it on people who don't listen. Save it for when you speak in a room that matters. Serafina signed. A door that had been closing on her for years finally stopped, and another, much heavier one, started to open. Some storms roar, but the quiet ones, the ones armed with proof, tear entire empires down. A few months after the divorce petition was filed, the Holt estate decided to celebrate. Not publicly, of course. Dorcella would never risk a press photographer catching them dancing on scandal. But privately? Among people who benefited from Holt contracts and didn't ask questions? Yes. Glasses clinked. Laughter floated across polished marble floors. Someone turned music on low. It looked like a casual gathering, but the smugness in the air was thick. Dorcella stood at the center of the living room, pearls resting heavily at her throat. Calder sat beside her, one hand on Nix Arden's knee. Nix wore a silk robe, pale blue, the same robe Luma had once chosen for Serafina on Mother's Day. The one Dorcella had mocked as too plain for a Holt wife. Now it was on Nix like a stolen crown. To better days, Dorcella said, raising her glass. To removing chaos from this family, Calder smirked. And to finally having a woman beside me who understands ambition. Nix leaned forward and pressed a quick kiss to his cheek, her eyes gleaming. She never fit, Dorcella added loudly. She doesn't belong in our world. She never did. A few relatives chuckled, some out of habit, some out of fear of disagreeing. Near the doorway, a security guard stood with his hands clasped in front of him. He'd read the newest internal memo. If trust representatives or court officers arrive, notify immediately. Do not obstruct. He swallowed and kept his eyes on the main entrance. Then ding. The doorbell echoed through the room. Calder frowned. We're not expecting anyone else. Maybe the caterer, Dorcella said. Go check. The guard reached the door first and opened it. A tall man in a dark suit stood there, composed and formal. He carried a leather case in one hand and an ID badge clipped to his lapel. Good evening, the man said. My name is Alaric Venn. I'm the appointed trust officer for the Vale Dynasty Trust. I have formal notices to deliver to Mr. Calder Holt and Mrs. Dorcella Holt regarding ongoing investigations and property protections. The guard stiffened slightly. Ma'am, sir, you'll want to hear this. Calder stepped forward, irritation already rising. Who? Alaric repeated calmly. Alaric Venn, trust officer. Nix's hand tightened around her glass. Dorcella's smile froze. Guests turned, sensing a shift. Calder forced a laugh. You've got the wrong address. We don't need whatever you're selling. I'm not selling anything, Alaric replied. I am here because one of my beneficiaries has been deprived of critical trust communication while living in this house and under your authority. He opened his leather case and removed a folder, embossed with a seal. The same seal that had been on Maeve's documents. The same seal on the burned letter. The Vale Trust recognizes Serafina Vale as the named beneficiary, Alaric said clearly. We have activated breach protocols due to interference. The room fell silent. What did you just say? Dorcella whispered. Alaric looked directly at her. Serafina Vale, sole heir of the Vale Dynasty Trust. Current estimated valuation, approximately $10 billion in holdings and assets. Gasps rippled through the room. Nix stood up so fast her chair scraped the floor. No, you're joking. Calder's face drained of color. That's impossible. She's nobody. Alaric's expression remained neutral. She is not nobody to us. And legally, she is not nobody to you either. He pulled out another document. We have obtained security footage of an intercepted trust letter inside the hospital where Mrs. Vale was treated. We have witness statements. We have forensic confirmation that the letter was burned after leaving our custody. His gaze shifted from Calder to Dorcella. And we have detailed financial records showing repeated transfers from the marital account to Miss Nix Arden's personal accounts during the same period. Nix's hands shook. Calder lunged toward the documents. Let me see that. Alaric pulled them back. You will see all of this through your counsel. Tonight, my duty is to formally notify you of 3 things. He held up one finger. First, Serafina Vale is our sole heir. Any attempt to pressure her into signing documents related to her inheritance, marital property, or child custody will be treated as coercion and challenged with our full legal resources. Second finger. Second, we have supported her attorney in filing for divorce, custody, and protective orders. As of this afternoon, an emergency order prevents the sale, transfer, or hiding of any major Holt asset that could impact her or her child. That includes this home. Calder's voice cracked. This is my house. Alaric's eyes didn't move. Legally, this house is marital property tied to your name and hers, he said. The court has temporarily frozen your ability to make unilateral decisions about it. You may live here for now, but you may not evict, threaten, or financially sabotage the protected party. A small chime sounded from the hallway. Everyone turned. The security guard glanced at the screen of the estate's home control panel mounted on the wall. "Sir," the guard said carefully, "we just got a remote update from the alarm company. They've implemented the court's temporary restrictions. You no longer have authority to change security codes, guest lists, or access permissions without court approval. It's locked until the hearing." Calder stared at him. "What?" Nix whispered. "You said she had nothing." Dorcella's hand shook, glass rattling against the crystal stem. "You can't do this to us. She was never one of us. She doesn't deserve this kind of protection." Alaric closed his folder calmly. "She didn't ask for protection," he said. "Maeve did. Years ago. She built an entire system to make sure that if anyone tried to strip Serafina of dignity or inheritance, they would find themselves standing exactly where you are right now." Several guests quietly set their glasses down. The room didn't feel like a celebration anymore. It felt like a courtroom without robes. Calder's face twisted. "You think you can destroy my life? You destroyed your own life when you decided humiliation and fraud were easier than honesty." Alaric replied, tone still mild. "We are simply making sure the person you targeted has the resources to stand up." The security guard looked from Calder to Dorcella, then to Nix. For the first time, his sympathy shifted clearly in one direction, not theirs. Alaric nodded once to the guard. "Thank you for allowing me to deliver formal notice." Then he turned to leave. At the doorway, he paused. "One more thing," he added without turning back. "The trust prefers to work quietly, but if necessary, we can work very publicly. I suggest you cooperate with the court." The front door closed behind him. The music was still playing. No one listened to it anymore. Calder suddenly understood. Serafina hadn't been removed from his world. He had just been shown he was never really in hers. The house wasn't the only thing slipping from Calder's fingers. Next, it would be his name, his child, and the story he told about himself. The courthouse hallway smelled like old paper and coffee. Still, when Serafina Vale stepped through the heavy doors into the family courtroom, the air felt cleaner than any room she'd been in for years. Reporters waited near the back, kept at a distance by security. A few whispered as she passed, glancing at printed headlines about the Vale Trust and the Holt scandal. Serafina walked with calm, steady steps. No diamonds, no dramatic outfit, just a simple dress, neat hair, and quiet composure. Beside her, Malin carried a slim case. Oris sat in the second row behind them, Luma, too young to sit through the full hearing, waited in a supervised room down the hall with a court child specialist. She would be brought in briefly, then taken back out. Across the room, the Holt family sat on one side of the aisle. Calder's jaw twitched. Dorcella's lips were pressed so tightly together they had turned white. Nix, out on bail and under investigation because of the falsified audit, stared straight ahead with hollow eyes. The judge entered. "All rise." Everyone stood, "Be seated." The room settled. "Case: Serafina Vale Holt versus Calder Holt," the clerk announced. "Divorce proceedings, custody determination, and motions regarding protective orders and allegations of fraud." Malin rose first. "Your Honor, we intend to show a clear pattern of financial abuse, emotional and medical cruelty, and deliberate interference with my client's legal inheritance and mail," she said. She handed the bailiff a stack of documents, which were passed to the judge. One by one, she outlined the evidence: the burned trust letter and forensic report confirming its origin, security footage of Dorcella taking the envelope at the hospital, hospital incident reports documenting the dirty water humiliation and derogatory comments, bank records showing Calder's transfers to Nix's private account, metadata proving Nix's audit was falsified. As each item was described, the judge's face grew more serious. Serafina didn't look at Calder. She looked at the judge. At the process. At the place Maeve had promised would matter more than private cruelty. When Malin finished, the judge turned to the other table. "Mr. Holt," he said, "you may respond." Calder stood too quickly. "Your Honor," he began, "this is exaggerated. Serafina, she's always been emotional. She takes everything personally. He floundered. "She's unstable," he finished. "She doesn't understand what she's talking about. She never contributed. I carried everything. And this trust officer, he's twisting things. She doesn't deserve." Malin rose. Objection, character attack, not a response to evidence. Sustained, the judge said. Mr. Holt, address the documents, not your personal opinion of your wife's personality. Calder's nostrils flared. The money transfers were, thank you gifts. Nix did consulting for my company, and the water incident was a joke taken out of context. People overreact. Nurses have their own agenda, and that letter, maybe it was junk mail. How are we supposed to know? The security footage shows your mother taking an urgent, registered letter bearing a financial trust seal, the judge said. Hospital protocols and your own nurse's notes contradict your version of events. Calder's voice rose. She was dead weight. I did what I had to do to wake her up. A wave of murmurs rippled through the courtroom. The judge's expression hardened. Watch your language, Mr. Holt. This is a court of law. Serafina rose before Malin could stop her. Your Honor, she said quietly. May I speak? The judge studied her for a moment, then nodded. Briefly. Serafina stepped forward, hands relaxed at her sides. She looked at Calder first. You mocked me while I was hooked to machines, she said softly. You told me I was a burden. You poured dirty water on me in a hospital room, in front of our daughter. Calder opened his mouth, but no words came out. You told me I cursed everything I touched, she continued. But you were the one who touched our accounts and drained them. You were the one who touched my mail and burned it. You were the one who turned a safe place into a stage for your cruelty. She turned to Nix. You wore my robe, Serafina said. You laughed while my child cried. You wrote fake reports to make me look unstable. All to stand next to a man who was hurting another woman and call it success. Nix's chin trembled. She looked down. Then Serafina faced Dorcella. You taught them that humiliating me was normal. That I was less because I didn't come from money. You said I didn't belong. Her voice didn't rise. It didn't break. You all thought silence meant I had nothing, Serafina said, letting her eyes sweep the room. It didn't. It meant I was watching, and waiting for the right room to speak in. The courtroom was so quiet the air felt thick. Even the reporters had stopped scratching their pens across notepads. The judge cleared his throat, regaining the formal tone. Thank you, Mrs. Vale, he said. You may be seated. She returned to her chair. After reviewing the paperwork again, the judge folded his hands. Based on the evidence, he said slowly, this court finds a clear pattern of emotional abuse, financial misconduct, and interference with trust property. Therefore, divorce is granted, effective immediately. Full legal and physical custody of the minor child, Luma, is awarded to Serafina Vale. Mr. Holt will have supervised visitation only, subject to review and compliance with court-ordered counseling. Financial restitution is ordered to Mrs. Vale for the misappropriated funds. Further, this court will be referring the matter of the destroyed trust letter, falsified audit, and suspicious transfers to the district attorney's office and relevant regulatory authorities for potential criminal investigation. Nix sucked in a sharp breath. Dorcella stared forward frozen. Calder's shoulders sagged as if someone had removed the bones. The judge struck his gavel once. Court is adjourned. Chairs scraped. Reporters began whispering again, already composing their headlines. Cameras flashed from the hallway as people filed out. Serafina didn't rush. She turned once, looking at Calder not with rage, but with a calm distance. Then she walked toward the door where the child specialist waited with Luma. As she stepped into the hallway, Malin leaned closer. We're not done, she whispered. This is just the legal foundation, Oris murmured. And the trust hasn't even fully spoken yet. Near the side exit, Nix Arden slipped away quickly. Head down, jacket pulled tight. She wasn't allowed to travel far without notifying the court, but she could still run from cameras. Malin's eyes tracked her. She's running from the spotlight, Malin said. People only run that hard when there's something else they haven't told us yet. Serafina paused. For the first time, anger flickered across her face. Not the chaotic kind. The kind that comes from finally recognizing how much someone has taken and knowing you have tools to get it back. Courtrooms reveal truth, but the final reckoning, the one that really changes people, comes afterward, when the lights are off and consequences stay. The days after the ruling weren't dramatic, they were steady, relentless. Across the city, news feeds filled with headlines. Holt Hare, accused of trust interference. Estate mistress linked to fraudulent audit. Hospital witnesses speak out on abuse of sick wife. Calder tried to give one interview early on, insisting it was a private misunderstanding, but the reporter countered with court documents and footage of the dirty water incident. Public sympathy didn't bend his way. It bent toward Serafina. Nix ran first. Not out of town, her bail conditions wouldn't allow that, but from every room that reminded her of who she'd tried to be. Clients dropped her quietly. Emails went unanswered. 2 contracts she bragged about online were terminated for convenience. Another sent her an official notice. We cannot maintain a relationship during an active fraud investigation. Within weeks, her accounts were partially frozen pending review. Transactions to and from Calder's company were flagged. The robe she'd once worn proudly now sat in a crumpled heap on the back of a chair in her small rented place. She stared at it one night and realized it had never made her powerful. It had only made her obvious. Her name appeared again in a short article, this time with the words "potential co-conspirator" attached. No one called to ask how she was. Even Calder stopped answering her messages. There was no dramatic arrest scene for her, at least not yet. Just a slow, steady narrowing of her world. Calder fought the longest. He tried to charm shareholders, reassure partners, and frame the court findings as misunderstandings exaggerated by an emotional spouse. But investors read newspapers too. When the trust's legal team quietly notified one of the Holt companies that they were reviewing past transactions connected to Calder, 2 board members resigned within a month. A bank, already uneasy with his spending and the negative publicity, decided not to renew a key line of credit. The numbers began to tilt in the wrong direction. He tried to sell some properties to cover gaps, but the emergency court order tied his hands on anything that might impact Serafina or Luma. Every attempt to shift assets triggered another conversation with a lawyer. In less than a year, 2 of his smaller businesses folded. One had been funding his lifestyle more than he admitted. He had once called Serafina poor, like it was a permanent stain. Now he sat in a quiet apartment with bare walls, sorting through legal bills he could barely pay. No cameras came to that room. No one applauded. Dorcella tried to salvage status through control. She attended luncheons, forced smiles, and said things like, "The court misunderstood, and my son married the wrong kind of woman." But the other women at the table had also seen the footage. They'd read about the envelope. They had daughters and granddaughters of their own. Invitations slowed, then stopped. Some women she once looked down on crossed the street rather than greet her in public. Within the family, blame moved like a restless shadow. Calder blamed her for intercepting the letter. Nix blamed her for dragging her into the trust mess. Cousins avoided Holt gatherings. The woman who had once orchestrated every cruel scene now found herself alone in a house that felt too large, too empty, and thanks to court restrictions no longer truly hers to command. Pride kept her from apologizing. Loneliness didn't. But by then, no one was listening. Far from the Holt estate, in a calm office lined with windows and quiet plants, Serafina sat at a polished oak table. Trust officer Alaric Venn sat across from her with a final stack of documents. Malin stood nearby, arms folded loosely, a small, rare smile on her face. Oris had joined by video call from his office, mostly to hear the conclusion to the story he'd helped unwind. "Miss Vale," Alaric said, "these papers finalize your full control of the Vale Dynasty Trust. All protective clauses are active. You have the power to direct investments, create charitable branches, and designate future beneficiaries." He paused. "This trust was designed not just to make you wealthy," he added, "but to keep you safe from exactly what you just lived through." Serafina glanced at the documents. Numbers still felt heavy on the page, but they didn't scare her. Maeve's training made sure of that. On the edge of the table sat a small drawing Luma had made while waiting 2 stick figures holding hands under a bright yellow sun. Above them, in wobbly letters, Luma had written, "Me and Mama, safe." Serafina's chest tightened. Not with pain this time, with gratitude. She lifted the pen, signed Serafina Vale on the main line. Then, on the copy where her name still included Holt for current legal records, she drew a neat line through it. Alaric nodded once. "It's done." Malin exhaled. "Welcome to a life you control." A second later, the door burst open. "Mama!" Luma ran inside, the child specialist trailing behind with an amused smile. Serafina opened her arms and lifted her, spinning just once, careful of her heart but free in her motion. "Did you win?" Luma asked, eyes wide. Serafina smiled. "We didn't just win, little light. We walked away." Luma giggled and hugged her neck. Are we safe now? Serafina looked into her daughter's eyes. We are safer than we have ever been, she said. And if anyone tries to hurt us again, we won't be silent. Luma nodded seriously, then leaned her head against Serafina's shoulder. Alaric stepped back to give them space. Malin turned toward the window, watching the city moving below. What will you do first? She asked. Serafina thought for a moment. Rest, she said. Then I want to make sure other women like me quiet, called burden, called weak, know they're not alone. Maybe a foundation, legal help, medical support, something that turns all of this into more than just my story. Oris's voice crackled through the speaker. That would be a very efficient use of $10 billion. They all laughed softly. Serafina walked to the window with Luma on her hip. The sun was low but bright, painting the glass in warm light. They tried to erase me, she murmured, more to herself than to anyone else. They forgot I owned the ending, Luma pointed out at the view. It looks like a new story, Mama. Serafina kissed her temple. It is, she said. Behind them, the folder with the trust documents lay closed. The chapter of humiliation was over. I hope you enjoyed watching it as much as I enjoyed creating it. Like, share, and comment on the lessons you've learned. Let me know where you're watching from in the comments below. See you in my next video. Unaware I secretly owned the company his mistress worked for. My husband left me and our triplets in the rain to please her, until he walks into the office. He didn't just leave them. He did it with the engine running, the window only halfway down, and another woman sitting right beside him while his 3 children stood there shivering. Ethan Bennett stared past the rain-streaked glass at the wife who had carried his triplets and said, almost bored, I can't do this anymore. She needs me tonight. Water dripped from the hood of Claire's thin jacket. Noah, Lily, and Grace clung to her legs, their small shoes already soaked. Around them, the school parking lot emptied, fast car doors slamming, tires splashing away, parents rushing their kids home. People glanced over. A few slowed. No one walked up. No one stopped him. In the passenger seat, the other woman shifted impatiently. Rachel Moore. Perfect hair, dry coat. The blue company lanyard hanging around her neck glowed faintly when the dashboard lights hit it. She glanced at Claire and the children, then smirked as if this wasn't a family breaking, just an obstacle finally being moved out of her way. To Ethan, Claire was just the quiet wife who didn't understand his world, a woman who stayed home, managed schedules, packed lunches, and lived small. He believed she knew nothing about the company that paid his consulting fees. He believed she had nowhere to go when he chose someone else over them in the rain. What he didn't know was this. The woman he abandoned at that curb had signed a very different set of documents long before the storm. On every official record, she wasn't just Claire Bennett, the housewife, she was Claire Hart, the name on the founding documents of a logistics and compliance company now held through a private trust. On paper, she was a silent majority owner. In practice, she was the unseen hand behind a board, a COO, and the HR department that had hired Rachel, printed her badge, and approved the lanyard she was wearing. The night he drove away was not the night she broke. She'd already begun to move her pieces quietly. But it was the night she stopped protecting his illusion and decided to stop hiding who actually owned the ground he was standing on and the office he would soon walk into. Completely unprepared. Dear viewers, if you felt that chill in your chest, don't just scroll past like the people who watched Claire get left in the rain. Subscribe, like, and tell me in the comments where you're watching from, so we walk into that office together when everything finally turns. The sound that broke the morning was not shouting or chaos, it was silence pressed too tight. Claire Bennett stood alone in the hallway, holding a phone that had already gone dark. For a brief second, her reflection stared back at her from the glass frame on the wall. A woman in her mid-30s, calm eyes, steady hands, hair pulled back with quiet purpose. Nothing about her looked fragile. And yet, this was exactly how the world saw her: soft, settled, harmless. That misunderstanding had followed her for years. Claire was the kind of woman people overlook by design. She chose neutral colors. She spoke last, not first. She asked questions instead of offering opinions. At 36, she had learned that invisibility was not weakness, it was cover. Behind her, the house stirred to life. 3 small voices echoed from the bedroom down the hall. Noah, Lily, Grace. The triplets were 6 years old, loud in laughter, gentle in sleep, and the center of Claire's universe. She turned as they ran toward her, socks mismatched, backpacks half-zipped, already arguing about nothing that mattered. She knelt instinctively, fixing straps, smoothing hair, kissing foreheads. This was her rhythm. This was her life. Ethan Bennett watched from the kitchen doorway, coffee in hand. At 38, he looked every bit the confident husband, pressed shirt, polished shoes, posture straight with quiet pride. He worked as an external consultant, moving between firms, always chasing the next opportunity. He liked to believe he was the engine of their household. To him, Claire was stable ground, comfortable, predictable. That was the role she had allowed. Breakfast passed without friction. The children ate. Ethan checked his phone. Claire packed lunches with practiced efficiency. No raised voices, no obvious tension. From the outside, it looked like a marriage untouched by struggle. But marriages, like businesses, often survived on what stayed unspoken. Years earlier, before the children, before the routines, Claire had been someone else entirely. The memory came back to her the way it always did, quiet, uninvited. She was 24 again, sitting at a small wooden desk late at night, the glow of a laptop illuminating stacks of paperwork. Her father's voice echoed in her mind, steady and certain. He had been a logistics entrepreneur, brilliant with systems, obsessed with efficiency. He taught her how supply chains worked before she could legally rent a car. He taught her to listen more than she spoke. When he died suddenly, he left her something most people never saw: seed money, carefully invested, paired with trust documents and a single instruction written in his handwriting: build something honest and keep your name clean. Claire had done exactly that. Under her maiden name, Claire Hart, she formed CB Holdings, then the operating company beneath it. She grew the business slowly and quietly. She refused interviews. She avoided press. Only her lawyer, Daniel Ross, and a handful of senior executives knew that the woman on the other end of the board calls was the actual founder. Everyone else saw the trust. Every decision was deliberate. Every signature calm. Even when she was pregnant, tired, swollen. Alone at night, she signed contracts with steady hands while Ethan traveled for what he called career-making projects. A flash of memory cut through her thoughts. Claire, pregnant, sitting alone at a conference table, pen hovering. Another memory. Her whispering into a phone late at night, voice low so no one would hear. Keep it under the trust, she had said. Use my maiden name on everything. Another. A leather folder locked in a drawer at home. The initials CB Holdings pressed into the cover. She had never hidden it out of fear. She hid it out of belief. Claire believed marriage should never be a power contest. She believed love worked best when it didn't keep score. Ethan had his consulting world. She kept her company life separate, tidy, invisible. Ethan had never asked. That was the part that mattered. The morning moved on. School drop-off, a quick kiss on the cheek. Ethan barely noticed the folder. Claire slipped deeper into the drawer before closing it. To him, she was exactly where she belonged at home, managing life quietly, depending on him. By evening, the family gathered around the dinner table. The children talked over one another, eager and bright. Claire listened, smiling, absorbing every detail like she always did. Ethan leaned back in his chair, relaxed, amused by the noise. You know, he said casually, cutting into his food. It's a good thing you don't care about money. The room stilled for half a second. Makes life simple, he added with a grin, unaware of what he had just stepped over. Claire looked at him. Really looked. She smiled. She said nothing. Noah laughed. Lily asked for more juice. Grace dropped her fork. Life went on, but something had shifted, just enough to matter. Later that night, after the children were asleep, Claire stood alone in the hallway again. The house was quiet, too quiet. She rested her hand against the drawer where the leather folder slept, untouched. She did not open it, not yet, because somewhere beyond the walls of this quiet house, a choice was already being made, one that would soon force truths into the open. And when that happened, the woman Ethan had never questioned would no longer stay invisible. The phone vibrated once, sharp, sudden, and out of place. Claire felt it before she heard it. Ethan froze mid-step in the living room, his hand already halfway into his pocket. For just a second, his expression shifted, not panic, not guilt, but calculation. He glanced at Claire, then at the triplets spread across the floor with their toys, and without a word he turned and stepped outside. The door closed softly behind him. That softness was what made it loud. Claire remained still, her heart beating faster than it should have for something so small. Through the glass, she watched Ethan's back as he lifted the phone to his ear, shoulders angled away from the house. His voice dropped, low and careful. "I told you, not right now." He stopped, turned slightly. Claire realized she was staring. Ethan ended the call too quickly, slid the phone back into his pocket, and walked inside with an easy smile that didn't quite reach his eyes. "Work," he said casually, as if that explained everything. Claire nodded. She always nodded. But something had already changed. Later that evening, the house moved through its normal rhythms. Homework at the table, baths drawn upstairs. Ethan paced near the window, checking his phone more often than before. Each time the screen lit up, he angled it away. At one point, the phone buzzed again. This time, Claire caught a glimpse. Just a second. That was all. A woman's profile picture filled the screen. Professional, polished, dark blazer. Hair pulled back. Around her neck hung a company lanyard, its logo blurred by motion, but the color unmistakable. That particular shade of blue. Claire's hand paused mid-motion as she folded a towel. Her chest tightened. She didn't know why, not logically, not yet, but her body reacted before her thoughts could catch up. She had seen that color before. Not in her home, not in Ethan's stories. On early branding mock-ups, in board decks, in the final logo file she had approved herself years ago, sitting at that wooden desk under a different last name. She had signed off on that blue. The realization passed through her like a cold draft. Claire forced herself to keep moving. She finished folding. She stacked towels. She told herself she might be imagining it. Plenty of companies use blue, but imagination didn't explain the tension in her shoulders. That night, after the children were asleep, Ethan stood near the window again. His phone vibrated. He didn't answer it this time. Instead, he typed quickly, his back turned. Claire watched from the doorway. She said nothing. Marriage had taught her that some truths revealed themselves faster when you stayed quiet. When Ethan finally went to bed, his phone remained on the nightstand. Face down. Too deliberate. Claire lay awake beside him, staring at the ceiling, listening to his breathing even out. She did not reach for the phone. Not yet. She had learned patience long before she learned trust. The next morning came with forced normalcy. Breakfast, school bags, shoes by the door. Ethan kissed the children goodbye, ruffled their hair, and left with a promise he had already stopped keeping. Claire stood at the counter long after the door closed. Later, while cleaning the kitchen, she noticed Ethan's laptop still open on the table. He rarely forgot it. The screen had dimmed, but not locked. Claire hesitated. This was the moment where curiosity could become something else. She touched the mouse. A calendar filled the screen. Most entries were standard: calls, travel, deadlines. But one line, repeated every week, caught her attention. Board prep external consultant. The entry appeared too often, too consistently, always late, always blocked off. Claire stared at the words. Ethan had never mentioned which company's board he was preparing for, just that he was helping a client at a high level. He liked phrases like that. She sat down slowly, her mind working through possibilities. Consultants prepared reports. They didn't usually attend internal board prep meetings unless they were deeply embedded, trusted, or personally involved. Her phone buzzed in her hand. A message from the school reminding her about an upcoming event for the triplets. Normal life pushing in, demanding attention. Claire closed the laptop. She didn't confront Ethan. She didn't accuse him. She didn't cry. Instead, she opened a drawer in the hallway, the one Ethan never touched. Inside, beneath old documents and family photos, rested a leather folder, its surface worn but immaculate. CB Holdings. Claire didn't open it. She only rested her hand on the cover, steady and deliberate. Somewhere, a woman with a blue lanyard was stepping deeper into a world she didn't fully understand. And somewhere else, a line was quietly being crossed, one that would soon force Claire to stop observing and start remembering exactly who she was. The calendar entry glowed in her mind as she turned off the light. Board prep, it said. Claire finally understood one thing for certain. Work was no longer just work. The voice came through the speaker without warning. Claire, are you on? Her breath caught. For half a second, Claire Bennett stood frozen in the quiet study. The door locked, the lights dimmed, her laptop already open on the desk. The screen glowed with a familiar interface, secure board portal, her maiden name in the corner, C. Hart, trustee representative. She reached forward and muted her camera. "Yes," she said calmly. "I'm here." The voice belonged to Daniel Ross, her lawyer and trustee representative. He was in his late 40s, sharp-eyed, precise, and one of the very few people who knew the full structure of Claire's world. Tonight he wasn't calling as her divorce attorney because there was no divorce yet. Tonight he was exactly what the login screen said, her shield between the trust and the executives. "Good," Daniel said. "They're about to start." The screen shifted. Another window opened. A man appeared mid-40s, composed, wearing a headset and a crisp shirt. His name appeared below his image. Mark Ellison, Chief Operating Officer. Mark had been with the company since its early growth phase. He was loyal, efficient, and deliberately uninformed about who Claire was in her personal life. To him, she was simply the founder who preferred distance, a controlling interest represented through the trust. "Evening, everyone," Mark said. "Let's begin." Claire leaned back in her chair, folding her hands together. Her camera stayed off. Most people in the virtual room had never seen her face. They didn't need to. Her votes and approvals came through Daniel, through signatures, through the trust. This was how she had always operated. Invisible, listening, controlling from the edges. The meeting moved quickly at first. Performance metrics, compliance updates, forecasts. Claire listened with practiced focus, her mind half on the numbers, half on the quiet storm building beneath them. Then Mark shifted topics. "I want to flag something positive from the compliance team," he said. "One of our internal analysts has shown exceptional initiative." Claire's fingers tightened slightly on her pen. "Our compliance analyst," Mark continued. "Rachel Moore." The name struck like a physical blow. Claire's posture stiffened. Her breath slowed, deliberate, controlled. She kept her voice steady when she spoke through audio only. "Go on," she said. Mark smiled slightly. "She's ambitious, sharp, knows how to position herself with leadership. Frankly, she's been impressing a lot of people." Claire stared at the dark reflection of her screen. Rachel Moore. The name echoed in her mind, pulling a memory forward. Months earlier, Claire had sat at this same desk, flipping through resumes forwarded by HR for sign-off at the trust level. She remembered pausing on one in particular. Strong credentials, clean record, strategic career moves. Rachel Moore. Claire had approved the hire with a single click. She remembered thinking the woman would go far. The meeting continued, but Claire's attention narrowed. Mark kept speaking. "Our internal audit team did flag one thing. Nothing formal yet, but I want it on the radar." He glanced down at his notes. "Rachel's been working closely with one of our external consultants," he said carefully, helping align some reporting and prep work for the board. Claire's heart beat once. Hard. External consultant. Her mind flicked to Ethan, to his calendar, to the recurring board prep entry he never explained, to the blue lanyard in the profile picture. She said nothing. The silence stretched. Daniel's voice cut in smoothly. "Is there any concern we should be aware of?" he asked, playing his role as trust counsel. Mark hesitated just a fraction. "Not enough to notice unless you were trained to listen for it. Not formal concern," he said. "Just proximity. Late nights. Off-site meetings logged under vague descriptions." He exhaled. "She's been unusually close to a married external consultant. We're treating it as a potential conflict of interest risk for now, and HR is quietly monitoring." The words landed with devastating clarity. Married consultant, compliance analyst, her company. Claire froze. For a moment the room felt too small, the air too thin, but she kept her tone flat. "Ensure HR documents everything," she said. "No gossip, only facts." "Of course," Mark replied. The meeting moved on, but Claire barely heard it. Her thoughts spiraled inward, controlled but relentless. The woman Ethan was hiding, the woman working inside her company, the woman climbing through doors Claire herself had built. When the meeting ended, the screen went dark. Daniel stayed on the line. "You all right?" he asked. Claire opened her eyes. "Yes." He didn't argue. He knew better. "Do you want me to dig?" Daniel asked. "Not yet," Claire said after a pause. "I need to understand the shape of this first." "Understood." The call ended. Claire sat alone in the darkened study, the silence pressing in again. She stared at the drawer across the room. The leather folder inside it felt heavier now, as if it were waking up. Rachel Moore had a name now, and a place. What Claire didn't yet know, what no one knew, was how far this betrayal had already gone. Claire stood slowly, her reflection faint in the dark screen. Somewhere, lines were being crossed in secret, and very soon, those lines would surface in the worst possible way. The announcement came without warning, dropped into the room like a crack of thunder. "I won't make it tonight." Claire looked up slowly. Ethan stood near the doorway of the bedroom, tie loosened, jacket draped over his arm. His tone was casual, too casual for what he was saying. "The kid's presentation," he added, as if remembering it late. "Work ran long." For a moment the house felt unbearably loud. The triplets were sprawled across the living room floor, cutting colored paper and gluing shapes together for the small performance they had practiced all week. Their excitement buzzed in the air, fragile and hopeful. Noah looked up first. "You promised." Ethan didn't meet his son's eyes. "I know, buddy. I'll make the next one." Lily's smile faltered. Grace said nothing at all. Claire felt the impact in her chest, sharp and immediate, but her face didn't change. She had learned long ago that reactions could be used against you, so she kept her voice level. "That's the third time," she said quietly. Ethan sighed, already halfway into his jacket. "Claire, this is important. You know how things are right now with this client. I'm prepping their board." She did know. That was the problem. "Go," she said. The word surprised even her. Ethan hesitated, just briefly, as if waiting for more, for anger, for pleading, for resistance. When none came, he nodded, relieved. "Thanks for understanding," he said, and turned toward the closet. Claire watched him pack. That was when she noticed it. The suit. Dark. Tailored. Expensive in a way Ethan's consulting fees didn't quite justify on their own. The fabric caught the light differently. The stitching was precise, deliberate, not something chosen on impulse, not something chosen just for PowerPoint slides in a boardroom. She didn't comment. She folded laundry on the bed with careful attention, each movement slow, measured. Ethan moved around her, checking his phone, glancing at his reflection. The distance between them felt wider than the room. When he stepped into the bathroom, Claire reached for his jacket, intending to hang it neatly. Her fingers brushed something stiff in the inner pocket. A receipt. She slid it out without thinking. Hotel bar, 2 drinks, timestamp, late evening. Charged to a corporate card the company had issued Ethan strictly for client travel. Her breath caught. For a brief second, the room tilted. Not because she didn't understand what she was seeing, but because she did. 2 drinks, not alone, and not an expense he had any right to charge that way. Claire folded the receipt carefully and slipped it back into the pocket. She hung the jacket exactly where it had been. Ethan emerged moments later, freshly composed. He kissed her cheek quickly, already distracted, already gone. "I'll call later," he said. She nodded. The door closed behind him with a finality that settled deep in her bones. Claire stood there long after his footsteps faded, listening to the quiet hum of the house. The triplets' voices drifted in from the living room, lower now, more subdued. She walked out to them. Noah looked up again. "Is Daddy coming?" Claire knelt in front of them, her heart aching in a way she refused to show. She smiled, gentle and steady. "Not tonight," she said, "but I'll be here." That had always been true. After the children were asleep, Claire sat alone at the kitchen table. The clock ticked softly. Her phone lay face up in front of her, screen dark. She thought of the blue lanyard, of Rachel Moore's name echoing in the board meeting, of the calendar entries, of the receipt. This was no longer a suspicion. It was a pattern. Still, Claire didn't call Ethan. She didn't demand explanations that would only teach him how to lie better. Instead, she stood and walked to the hallway. She opened the drawer. The leather folder waited inside, just as it always had. This time, she took it out. She placed it on the table, opened it, and looked at the documents inside, not as something separate from her marriage, but as something that now intersected with it. Then she picked up her phone. Her fingers hovered over the screen. She typed a single word to Daniel. "Proceed." She stared at it for a long moment. Then, for the first time, she didn't hit send. She saved it in drafts instead. Because she knew something now with unsettling clarity. Ethan was already crossing lines, But he hadn't crossed the line that would end everything. Not yet. Claire turned off the kitchen light and stood in the darkness, listening to the house breathe around her. Outside, somewhere far from the quiet of home, choices were being made that would soon collide with consequences. And very soon, someone would make a decision that could not be undone. The sky broke open without warning. Thunder cracked so close it rattled the glass doors of the school auditorium, and rain slammed down in heavy sheets, loud and unforgiving. Parents rushed toward cars, coats over heads, voices raised. Children cried, laughed, shouted. Chaos moved fast. Claire stood still. She was under the narrow overhang, near the curb, one arm wrapped around Noah, the other pulling Lily and Grace close as water soaked through their shoes. The triplets clutched their paper programs, edges dissolving, ink bleeding into nothing. Ethan was late. Again. Claire checked her phone. No missed calls. No message. Just the time glowing back at her, each second stretching thin. He said he'd be here, Grace whispered, her voice small under the roar of the rain. He will, Claire said automatically. But even as she spoke, something in her chest tightened, not fear, not panic, but recognition. The quiet kind that came right before truth. Headlights cut through the rain. A familiar car slowed near the curb. Noah's face lit up. Dad! The car stopped. The engine idled, wipers thudding back and forth against the storm. The window rolled down halfway. Ethan sat behind the wheel, dry, clean, his jacket immaculate. He didn't get out. Claire stepped forward instinctively, rain soaking her sleeves, her hair sticking to her face. She leaned down so the children could see him clearly. Then she saw the passenger seat. A woman sat there, mid-30s, polished, composed, a dark coat draped perfectly over her shoulders, untouched by the storm. Her hair smooth, her makeup intact. Around her neck, unmistakable even now, hung a blue company lanyard. This time the logo wasn't blurred. It was the exact emblem Claire had approved years ago. Rachel Moore looked straight ahead, then turned slowly toward Claire, and smiled. Not kindly, not awkwardly, impatiently. Ethan cleared his throat. He didn't look at the children first. He looked at Claire. I can't do this anymore, he said, voice flat, as if reciting a decision he'd already rehearsed. She needs me tonight. I'm moving on, Claire. This isn't working. The words landed hard. Lily gasped. Noah froze. Grace tightened her grip on Claire's coat. Claire felt the rain soak deeper, colder, but her mind went strangely calm. Time slowed, every detail sharp. The way Ethan's hands stayed on the wheel, the way he avoided Noah's eyes, the way Rachel's gaze flicked briefly to the children, then back to Claire, measuring, dismissive. She knows, Claire realized. Rachel knew he was married, she knew there were children, and she was here anyway. Dad? Noah said softly. Are you coming home? Ethan finally looked at them. For a split second, something like hesitation crossed his face. But it passed quickly, replaced by resolve and something uglier, self-preservation. I'll talk to you later, he said, already shifting the car into gear. This is better for everyone. Claire pulled the children closer, shielding them from the rain and from him. Rachel leaned back in her seat, satisfied, as if a negotiation had just ended in her favor. Her smirk was small, almost imperceptible. But Claire saw it. The car rolled forward. No dramatic goodbye, no apology, no explanation that made sense. Just a choice made in plain sight. The taillights disappeared into the rain. For a long moment, no one moved. The storm swallowed the street, washing away footprints, blurring everything but the present. Lily started to cry. Grace followed. Noah stood silent, his face tight with confusion and hurt far too old for 6 years. Claire lowered herself to her knees on the wet pavement, ignoring the cold seeping through her clothes. She wrapped her arms around all three of them, pulling them into her, anchoring them. She didn't cry. Not because she couldn't, but because she understood something now with absolute clarity. This wasn't a mistake, it was a decision. And decisions had consequences. Other parents passed by, offering sympathetic looks. A couple of quiet, "Do you need a ride?" Claire shook her head gently, thanked them, and kept her focus on the children in her arms, their shaking breaths, their trust. After a moment, she stood. She took off her coat and wrapped it around Grace. She adjusted Lily's backpack. She took Noah's hand. "We're going home," Claire said calmly. Noah looked up at her. "Is Dad coming back?" Claire met his eyes. She didn't lie. "I don't know," she said. "But we're going to be okay." They walked away from the curb together, rain soaking them to the skin. Later that night, after hot showers and dry pajamas, the house fell quiet again. The children slept in one room, close together, as if instinctively refusing distance. Claire stood alone in the hallway. She removed her wet shoes. She set her phone down on the table. Her hands were steady. She didn't replay the moment. She didn't ask why. She walked to the drawer. This time, she opened it without hesitation. The leather folder came out, heavier than before, its presence undeniable. She placed it on the table, opened it, and stared at the documents inside not with anger, but with focus. Power, she realized, wasn't loud. It waited. Claire picked up her phone, opened the unsent draft to Daniel, and read the single word she had typed days earlier. Proceed. She pressed send. Somewhere beyond this house, someone believed they had won. They were wrong. Very soon, the storm would move indoors. Here we go. Scene 610, cleaned up for logic and realism, keeping your voice and length very close to the original, then a list of the main logic gaps I fixed at the end. The sound of the lock clicking open was louder than the thunder had been. Claire stood alone in the hallway long after midnight, the house wrapped in a deep, unnatural quiet. The triplets were asleep in the guest room, their beds pushed close together, as if even in dreams they refused to be separated again. The steady rhythm of their breathing drifted down the hall. Claire turned the small key once more. The drawer slid open. Inside lay the life Ethan had never bothered to ask about. Neatly stacked trust documents. Company structure charts mapped with clean lines and careful layers. Board access credentials printed and laminated. Early branding notes, including the exact shade of blue now hanging from Rachel's neck. Everything orderly. Everything controlled. Claire removed the leather folder and carried it to the kitchen table. She sat down slowly, as if grounding herself before touching something powerful. This was the moment pain turned into precision. She didn't cry. She didn't replay the image of the car driving away. She didn't let herself imagine Ethan's voice or Rachel's smirk. She opened the folder. The pages were familiar, comforting, even. They reminded her who she had been before she chose to become invisible for love. Her name, Claire Hart, appeared again and again alongside CB Holdings and the operating company beneath it. She picked up her phone and opened the draft she had saved days earlier. One word waited on the screen. Proceed. This time, she pressed send. Daniel Ross answered on the second ring. "Tell me where you are emotionally," he said calmly. That was Daniel's way, always direct, always steady. For years, he had been her trust counsel, the only one besides the COO who knew she was more than a silent line item on an org chart. "I'm focused," Claire replied. Silence. "Then, good," Daniel said. "Then we move carefully. We keep your roles clean, founder, trustee, and wife seeking a possible divorce. No impulsive overlap." They met the next afternoon in Daniel's office, away from her home, away from emotions. Claire arrived alone. Daniel had known her for years, long enough to understand that when she didn't raise her voice, something serious was happening. He laid out the reality without softness. "If you decide to file," he said, "we won't rely on hurt feelings. We rely on facts. We document adultery and misuse of company resources. Timing matters. The way we obtain that evidence matters more." Claire nodded. "I don't want a scandal. I want the truth, and I want the children protected." "Then we handle this in two lanes," Daniel said. "One, corporate. As founder and majority owner, you're entitled to a full review of any compliance breach, especially involving a consultant and a staff member. Two, personal. As your attorney, I protect you and the kids." He slid a folder across the desk. "You keep your public distance from this. We let internal processes do the work." "That's fine," Claire said quietly. "I've been distant for years." Daniel's mouth twitched in something almost like a smile. "I'm bringing in someone who specializes in internal misconduct, corporate side only. She'll report to me. I'll filter what matters for the divorce." "Her name?" Claire asked. "Maya Holt." The second meeting happened 2 days later, in a quiet cafe, far from Claire's usual routines. Maya arrived first. She was in her early 40s, dressed plainly, her posture alert without tension. A former corporate investigator, she specialized in internal misconduct and quiet exposure. For employees, she was the last person you wanted interested in your name. You don't want drama, Maya said as Claire sat down. You want proof. Yes, Claire said. Only proof, and only what we can obtain properly. Maya nodded, approving the answer. Then we'll get along. They didn't discuss feelings. They discussed thresholds. What we need, Maya explained, sliding a tablet from her bag, is documented misuse of company resources, verified communication during work hours, and access patterns that violate policy. Because your owner, the board and HR have authorized a full internal review. She turned the screen slightly so Claire could see. Hotel receipts appeared first. Same bar, same location, multiple dates. All charged to an internal client travel card issued to Ethan for this one major engagement. Hotels where he wasn't booked to stay, Maya said. Bar charges on nights with no client meetings logged. You can't expel him from the company, he's not an employee. But you can show he violated policy and trust. Emails followed. Short, familiar, intimate in tone. Ethan and Rachel. Subject lines about board prep that turned into dinner plans halfway down the thread. Sent during office hours, Maya said. Deleted by both of them from their inboxes. Archived copies remained on the server. Your IT department was very cooperative once they got direction from the trust. Security footage came next. Late-night office access. Two figures entering separately within minutes of each other, leaving together almost 2 hours later. Her badge, then his, Maya said. Different nights. No scheduled meetings in the system. HR had flagged the pattern as a potential professionalism issue. Now it's part of a bigger picture. Finally, expense reports, numbers adjusted, categories altered. Personal meals filed as client dinners, overlapping with the bar receipts. Claire felt a steady pressure behind her eyes but kept her expression calm. This was not chaos. This was structure. That night, after the children were asleep again, Claire sat at the kitchen table with her laptop open. Emails from the COO, Mark Ellison, waited in her inbox. Routine updates. Performance notes. She read them carefully now, with new understanding. Rachel Moore's name appeared more than once. Excellent initiative. Strong alignment with leadership. Rapid internal trust. Claire closed the laptop slowly. Every piece was connecting. Still, she didn't contact Ethan. Still, she didn't warn Rachel. Silence was not weakness. It was space. 2 weeks passed. The investigation deepened quietly, methodically. Claire maintained routines, school drop-offs, homework, dinner, stability for the children. At night, she reviewed sanitized summaries from Daniel. In the mornings, she smiled. One evening, as she rinsed dishes, her phone buzzed. Maya. There's something else, Maya said. Claire set the plate down. What? I broadened the search. Maya continued. With IT's help, we checked for any non-work files stored in Rachel's work cloud account. She'd been sloppy. Claire said nothing. Messages, Maya said. Not just between them. Notes she wrote to herself. Screenshots. And in one of them, she referenced you, by name. Claire's chest tightened. She knew? She knew you were his wife, Maya said. She knew about the children. She wrote that he was dragging his feet because of the triplets. The words landed slowly, heavily. So it wasn't confusion. It wasn't ignorance. It wasn't a blind affair. It was a choice. Maya's voice softened, just slightly. We also have enough to justify ending his consulting agreement cleanly. Legal's already preparing language. The board will want a controlled confrontation. Claire inhaled once, deeply. Thank you, she said. When the call ended, Claire remained seated in the dark kitchen. The house was still. The folder lay open in front of her. She touched the edge of the documents, steadying herself. Somewhere Rachel believed she was untouchable. Somewhere else, Ethan believed silence meant safety. They were both wrong. And very soon, someone would step into a room they thought they controlled only to realize it had never belonged to them at all. The argument exploded without warning. You told me this was handled. Rachel Moore's voice cracked through the recording, sharp and uneven. Nothing like the calm confidence she wore at the office. The video shook slightly, filmed from a phone placed face down on a table, the camera angled just enough to capture Ethan's clenched jaw and restless pacing. I said I'd take care of it, Ethan snapped. You're overreacting. I'm not, Rachel shot back. Audits don't just happen. People are looking. The room on the screen was unfamiliar to Claire. Modern, expensive, temporary, a hotel suite. She recognized the logo of the hotel chain from the receipts Maya had already shown her. The recording continued. Rachel stood near the window, arms crossed tight against her chest. She was no longer polished, no lanyard, no practiced smile, just fear slipping through the cracks. You promised me, she said. You said she was out of the picture. Ethan stopped pacing. I said I was handling it. That's not the same thing, Rachel said. She's not stupid, Ethan. She's asking questions. HR is asking questions. Claire watched the footage in complete silence. She sat at her kitchen table, lights off, laptop glowing softly in the dark. The house was asleep. The children were safe. This moment belonged to truth alone. On screen, Ethan ran a hand through his hair. You're panicking for nothing. The board likes me. No one's coming after you. Rachel let out a sharp, humorless laugh. You don't know that, she said. She stepped closer to him, lowering her voice. If this blows back on me, she said slowly, deliberately, I'll say you pursued me. I'll say you used your influence as a consultant to pressure me. And I'll give them everything. Ethan froze. What? He said. I won't go down for this, Rachel continued. I worked too hard to get here, and I'm not losing it because you couldn't keep your life separate. You said you cared about me, Ethan replied, disbelief flickering across his face. Rachel's expression hardened. I care about myself. The words hung in the air. Claire leaned back slightly in her chair. That sentence told her everything she needed to know. The argument escalated on screen. Ethan raised his voice. Rachel cut him off. At some point, the recording ended abruptly. The phone clearly picked up and slipped into a pocket. The video stopped. Claire stared at the frozen frame. Ethan mid-sentence. Rachel's face turned away, already calculating her exit. A soft knock sounded on the kitchen door behind her. Claire didn't flinch. Maya stepped in quietly, closing the door behind her. She carried herself the same way she always did, calm, efficient, observant. Recorded 3 days ago, Maya said, setting her tablet down beside the laptop. She started it herself. Claire nodded once. Where did you find it? In a personal folder she'd created on her work cloud drive, Maya replied. She labeled it just in case. IT flagged it when we expanded the search parameters. Because it's on company systems, legal cleared its use. Claire exhaled slowly. She was scared, Claire said, but not for the right reasons. No, Maya agreed. But this recording strengthens everything. It shows she knew he was married. It shows she anticipated consequences. It shows she's prepared to sacrifice him to save herself. Claire closed the laptop. She didn't betray him for me, Claire said quietly. She betrayed him for herself. Maya watched her closely. That's usually how it goes. They sat in silence for a moment. Claire's mind moved methodically, placing this new piece into the larger picture. The affair, the misuse of company funds, the deception, and now documented intent to lie if cornered. Rachel wasn't loyal. She was strategic, and strategy could be used. For the next phase, Maya said, HR and legal have proposed a joint session. Officially, it's a board prep meeting to review consultant performance. Unofficially, it's where they'll confront both of them with this. And I'll be there, Claire said. Maya nodded. If you want to step forward as founder, that's the moment. The board has already been briefed in closed session. They support you. The words settled heavily between them. Claire stood and walked to the window. She looked out at the dark street, at the reflection of herself in the glass, a woman shaped by patience, by restraint, by years of choosing peace over power. Behind her, the folder lay open on the table. CB Holdings. She thought of the children under the school awning, of the rain, of the car pulling away. Claire turned back to Maya. Her expression was calm, resolved. She nodded once. Outside, somewhere, someone believed they still had time. They didn't. Very soon, a door would open and the truth would walk in on its own. The elevator doors opened with a soft chime, and Ethan Bennett stepped out like a man who believed he still belonged. For months, he'd walked these halls as an external consultant, talking about strategy and governance, never once wondering who actually owned the place. He adjusted his cufflinks, straightened his jacket, and glanced down the glass-lined hallway. The office hummed with quiet importance, polished floors, muted voices, the steady confidence of a place where decisions shape futures. Ethan walked with ease. This was familiar territory. This was where he felt powerful. Behind him, Rachel Moore exited the elevator more cautiously. She looked composed on the surface, heels steady, hair perfect, but her eyes moved too quickly. Her shoulders were tight. The blue company lanyard hung heavier around her neck than it ever had before. "You're overthinking this," Ethan murmured as they walked. "It's just a board briefing. They probably want to talk about my recommendations." Rachel forced a smile. Of course. But she didn't believe it. They entered the conference room together. The board members were already seated, men and women in tailored suits, tablets open, expressions neutral. At the far end of the table sat Linda Harris, the HR director, calm and observant. Beside her was Michael Grant, external legal counsel, flipping through a slim folder with quiet focus. Mark Ellison, the COO, sat near the center, posture tense but composed. Ethan nodded confidently as he took a seat near the middle. Rachel sat 2 chairs away, close enough to feel protected. She clasped her hands tightly in her lap. The meeting began routinely. Quarterly updates, compliance summaries, performance metrics. Ethan relaxed slightly. This was fine. He'd weathered harder rooms. Then the door opened. The sound cut clean through the room. Every head turned. Claire walked in. She didn't rush. She didn't hesitate. She wore a simple, tailored coat, her posture straight, her expression calm, almost gentle. Her presence shifted the air instantly, like a pressure change before a storm. Ethan's breath caught. Rachel's face drained of color. Most of the board had never seen her in person. They'd known her by a different name on documents, by her voice in a few high-level calls, by the trust. Now she was here. Claire walked to the table and placed a familiar leather folder down with deliberate care. The sound it made against the polished surface was soft, but it echoed. She looked around the room once, making eye contact with each board member. Then she spoke. "I'm Claire Hart Bennett," she said evenly, "founder and majority owner, acting through the CB Holdings Trust." Silence fell like a physical weight. Ethan stared at her, his mind scrambling. Hart, Bennett, founder. The words collided in his head, refusing to fit into any story he'd told himself. Rachel's hands trembled. Mark Ellison recovered first. He inclined his head slightly in respect. He had known Claire Hart for years, voice only. Now he understood the rest of her name. Linda Harris folded her hands. Michael Grant closed his folder. Claire remained standing. "I've been fully briefed on the recent internal investigation," she said calmly. "Out of respect for everyone in this room, I thought it best that we address the findings transparently." She nodded once to Michael. The screen at the end of the room lit up. Emails appeared first. Clear, time-stamped, intimate in tone. Messages between Ethan and Rachel sent during work hours, mixing client updates with personal plans. The room grew still as lines of text scrolled upward. Rachel swallowed hard. Ethan's jaw tightened. Next came expense reports, highlighted discrepancies, adjusted categories, bar charges and meals that didn't match any documented client activity, all tied to the same corporate card. Linda spoke quietly. Multiple violations of company policy regarding use of corporate funds, then access logs and blurred security stills. Badge entries late at night, 2 IDs, R. Moore, E. Bennett, temporary consultant badge. No scheduled meetings, matching the dates on the expenses. Finally, the video played. The argument, the threats. Rachel's voice filled the room, sharp and unfiltered. "If this blows back on me, I'll say you pursued me. I'll give them everything." A murmur rippled through the board. Ethan went pale. Claire watched him without expression. When the video ended, the silence returned heavier now. Michael spoke first. "These materials have already been reviewed by HR, outside counsel, and the audit committee," he said. "We are here to record formal actions." Linda Harris turned to Rachel, her tone even. "Miss Moore," she said, "based on the documented misconduct, the misuse of company time and resources, and your admitted intent to misrepresent events if investigated, you are placed on immediate administrative leave, pending final termination." Rachel's chair scraped loudly as she stood. "This is a misunderstanding," she said, her voice cracking. She looked to Ethan, desperate. "Say something." Ethan didn't move. Michael added, Your professional compliance credentials will be reported to the appropriate licensing body with a full investigative file. Rachel's composure shattered. She grabbed her bag with shaking hands, her eyes darting around the room, searching for sympathy. She found none. As she reached the door, she glanced back once at Claire. Claire didn't flinch. Rachel left the room alone. The door closed behind her. Michael turned his attention to Ethan. "Mr. Bennett," he said, "as of this moment, your consulting agreement with the company is terminated for cause. We will notify your firm and any known partners that the termination relates to documented ethics violations." Ethan stared at him. My firm has other contracts with you." "Not anymore," Mark said quietly. "The board has voted to sever all ties." Claire said nothing. She didn't need to. "This concludes my involvement in this portion of the meeting," she said finally, her voice quiet but carrying. "Further legal actions will proceed through counsel." She gathered the folder and took a step back. The board members remained silent, absorbing what they had just witnessed. Careers had ended in minutes. Reputations had shifted without a single raised voice. Ethan finally found his. "Claire," he whispered, "please." The word broke, small and useless. Claire looked at him once. She didn't answer. She turned and walked out of the room. Behind her, the man who thought he understood her sat frozen, watching the life he assumed was secure collapse without a single dramatic scene. And as the door closed softly behind Claire, one truth settled heavily in the air. This was only the beginning. The papers hit the table with a sharp, final sound. Ethan flinched. The courtroom was quiet in the way only serious places ever were: wood-paneled walls, high ceilings, the faint echo of footsteps that reminded everyone inside that nothing said here could be taken back. The bailiff stepped away after serving the documents, leaving Ethan staring down at the divorce petition as if it were written in a language he didn't understand. Across the aisle, Claire sat perfectly still. She wore a simple navy dress, her hair neatly pulled back, her hands folded calmly in her lap. There was no anger on her face, no triumph, just focus. She looked like a woman who had already made peace with what was about to happen. Beside her sat Daniel Ross, composed, precise, his posture relaxed in a way that came only from preparation. He had guided Claire through every step, separating what belonged in corporate files from what belonged in family court. Ethan's hands trembled as he lifted the papers. Grounds for divorce were listed clearly at the top: adultery, financial misconduct impacting the marital estate, evidence attached under seal. "This is ridiculous," Ethan muttered under his breath. Claire didn't react. The judge entered moments later, an older woman with sharp eyes and a voice that carried authority without force. Everyone rose, everyone sat. The proceedings began. Daniel stood first, his tone calm but firm. He laid out the case without drama: evidence already submitted, timelines already verified. He did not show the board video in open court. Instead, he used certified summaries, hotel receipts, email excerpts, and the school's written account of the night Ethan failed to pick up his children in the storm. Each point landed cleanly. Ethan's lawyer tried to shift blame, to suggest emotional strain and miscommunication. The judge listened without interrupting. When he finished, she turned back to Daniel. "I've reviewed the documentation," she said. "We'll proceed." Ethan glanced back at Claire. She didn't look at him. As the hearing continued, visuals told the story more loudly than words. Documents slid across polished wood toward the judge. Ethan's fingers shook as he tried to organize his responses. Claire remained steady, her posture unchanged, her gaze forward. When Ethan finally spoke, his voice cracked. "I made mistakes," he said. "But this doesn't need to destroy everything. I can fix it. We can fix it." Claire's jaw tightened slightly, but she stayed silent. Daniel rose again. "With respect," he said, "my client did not destroy this marriage. She protected herself and her children when trust was broken and when marital funds and reputation were put at risk." He paused. "She has also taken steps to shield the company which predated the marriage and is held in trust under her maiden name from any financial entanglement in this process." The judge nodded. Slowly. "Mr. Bennett," she said, turning her attention fully to Ethan, "your actions had consequences beyond your marriage. You misused funds tied to your consulting income, and your behavior at your children's school in a dangerous storm was documented by multiple witnesses." Ethan swallowed. I panicked. It was one time. And one time can be enough, the judge said. I've also received notice that several of your consulting contracts have been terminated following an internal ethics investigation at your client's company. Ethan's head snapped up. That has nothing to do with, it has everything to do with your credibility, the judge replied. She turned to Claire. Mrs. Bennett, she said, do you wish to address the court? Claire stood. Her movements were controlled, deliberate. When she spoke, her voice was clear and calm, carrying across the room without strain. I trusted my husband, she said simply. I built a life with him. I protected his image. When that trust was broken, I did not retaliate in public. I followed the law. I protected our children from chaos. She paused. My priority has always been our children. It will stay that way. The judge nodded once. That was enough. The decision came swiftly after that. Based on the evidence presented, the judge said, this court grants the dissolution of marriage. The sound of the gavel echoed sharply. Mr. Bennett will have no claim to CB Holdings or any of its operating subsidiaries, as those assets were established and placed in trust prior to the marriage. Ethan's breath hitched. Other marital property will be divided as outlined in the agreement before the court. Regarding the children, the judge continued, primary physical custody is awarded to Mrs. Bennett. Given Mr. Bennett's recent conduct, visitation will be initially supervised, with a review scheduled after a period of demonstrated consistency and responsibility. Claire closed her eyes for just a moment. Relief, not triumph, washed through her. Ethan sat frozen, staring ahead as if waiting for someone to stop it all. No one did. The judge looked directly at Claire now, her tone softer but no less firm. Mrs. Bennett, she said, you are free to move forward. The words landed quietly, powerfully. Claire nodded once in acknowledgement. As the courtroom began to empty, Ethan finally turned toward her, desperation breaking through his composure. Claire, he said hoarsely, we can still talk, please. I made a mistake. She looked at him then, not with anger, not with pity. With clarity, she didn't answer. Claire turned and walked out beside Daniel, her footsteps steady against the marble floor. Behind her, a chapter closed. Ahead of her, something else waited, something not built on survival, but on choice. And very soon, Claire would decide what her freedom would look like. The room fell silent the moment Claire stepped onto the stage. Hundreds of eyes lifted at once. Conversations stopped mid-sentence. The low hum of the company town hall vanished, replaced by a sharp, electric stillness. For the first time, many of them were seeing her not as a name in documents, not as the trust representative, but as a woman standing openly at the center of everything she had built. Claire Bennett, Claire Hart Bennett, as the slide behind her now read stood tall. Her hands did not shake. Her face held no anger, only certainty. Behind her, the company logo glowed on the screen, clean, steady, familiar. In the front row sat Mark Ellison, the COO, his posture respectful, his expression serious. He had steered the company through the immediate aftermath of the scandal. Now, he watched the founder step into the light. Claire moved to the podium. She didn't raise her voice. She didn't need to. This company was built on integrity, she said, her words calm and clear. On systems that work, on people who do the right thing when no one is watching. She let that sit for a beat. Recently, that trust was tested, not by all of you, but by a few. Choices were made that betrayed the standards we set. Those choices have been addressed privately, fairly, and firmly. A ripple of quiet relief moved through the room. People had heard rumors. Now they had confirmation that leadership hadn't ignored them. Power doesn't excuse betrayal, Claire continued, and silence should never be mistaken for weakness. Somewhere in the room, a few heads lifted. We all make mistakes, she said. What defines us is how we take responsibility for them. From today forward, we're implementing clearer boundaries around external consultants, stricter oversight on corporate cards, and expanded ethics training for everyone, including leadership. She paused. I expect the same standard from myself. The words were simple and completely true. When you see my name on documents, she said, I don't want it to feel distant anymore. I want you to know there is a person behind it who will protect this place and the people in it. When she stepped back from the podium, the silence broke into applause. Not wild, not frantic, but strong, unified, earned. Claire nodded once in acknowledgement and left the stage without waiting for more. Outside the building, the afternoon light was soft. The triplets stood near the entrance with a trusted family friend, backpacks at their feet, swinging their legs impatiently as they waited. Noah spotted her first. "Mom." They ran to her all at once. Claire knelt down immediately, bringing herself to their level, wrapping her arms around all three. She breathed them in warm, solid, safe. "We're safe," she said quietly, looking each of them in the eyes. "And we're moving forward." Lily smiled. Grace hugged her tighter. Noah nodded, as if that promise alone was enough. Because it was. Across town, in a small, sparsely furnished apartment, Ethan sat alone. The room was bare. No photos on the walls, no noise. His phone lay on the table beside him, screen dark, emails unanswered. Messages from former colleagues remained unread, some polite, some cold, all distant. Rachel had stopped responding weeks ago. He'd heard through someone else that she had taken a job out of state, lower position, no leadership role. Her reputation followed her quietly, the way truths often did. She never reached out again. Ethan leaned back in his chair, staring at the ceiling. For the first time, there was no one to blame but himself. That evening, Claire tucked the children into bed. She lingered longer than usual, listening to their breathing, smoothing their hair. When she turned off the light, she stood in the doorway for a moment, letting the quiet settle. In the hallway, the drawer remained open. The leather folder rested inside, no longer hidden, no longer heavy. Claire closed it gently. Later, as she stood by the window, watching the last light fade from the sky, she reflected on everything she had been and everything she had chosen to become. She had loved deeply, she had trusted fully, and when that trust was broken, she had not lost herself trying to prove it. She had waited, she had prepared. She had acted. Her phone buzzed softly with a message from Mark confirming the next board agenda and ethics policy updates. She smiled faintly and set it down. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, new decisions, new responsibilities. But tonight there was peace and strength and a future built on her own terms. As she turned away from the window, one quiet truth followed her like a steady echo. He thought love made her weak. He never realized it made her patient. I hope you enjoyed watching it as much as I enjoyed creating it. Like, share, and comment on the lessons you've learned. Let me know where you're watching from in the comments below. See you in my next video.